So yeah, the last questions I had was about the Konix Multi-System, which became something else for which you worked on. I tried to read the detailed story about the Konix Multi-System, but it's quite complicated because it failed and then it restarted and then... Well,
yes. Well, it had an existence before I came along, I'm sure, a couple of years before. But what happened is I had a call, I couldn't tell you when, maybe 1992, I had a phone call from someone called Mike, and he said that they were getting a group of games programmers together to go to China to train Chinese people to program this new games console. And would I like to come along and help train the population, to program? And that was such a strange request. That I wasn't really in a position to do it because I had commitments already, and I didn't, frankly, have enough money to take the risk of suddenly going off and leaving, rent unpaid and so many things. So I thought that was the end of that. But 6 months later, he called again, and this time it was, we were setting up in a company to develop this. And would I like to come on board and do different things? Nothing precisely defined, not maybe to write games, but maybe to coordinate other programmers and write system software and so on. And that was for me, I was quite poor, quite short of money. And so this was a fantastic thing for me because it was suddenly I could put behind me what had been a very difficult time. So I said yes, and I went to London to meet Mike and someone called Keith Hall to talk about what I'd done. I think they had been given my name by somebody I had done work for. I'm not sure who it is now. And then I remember going to Cardiff and seeing the hardware, and at that time they were all over the country. They had programmers in Sheffield, which is in Yorkshire.
I made some years of my studies in Sheffield, actually.
Oh, okay.
Two years. Place. So I know where it is.
And so I went to Cardiff to see the hardware guys, and then up to Sheffield to see the programmers. And then what we did is we carried on working separately for some time. They gave me like a big black box which had one of these prototype machines in, which I think was 8086 originally. I think it became 80386 after another development. And I carried on for quite a while working from my office in Ely and periodically going to different places to meet people and just finding out how this machine works and so on. And then eventually it was obvious that we couldn't carry on in all these different parts of the country. So we set up an office in Milton Keynes, which is where I am now. And everyone who wanted to stay part of the company came down and became part of, worked at the office in Milton Keynes. And what started out as a games machine just kept changing. They could never decide really what it was going to be.
The story goes far backwards because it was like ex-people from Sinclair that wanted to do a more powerful computer called the Loki prototype. They worked on a prototype, and then there are people from Konix who saw that and wanted at the same time to make a video game system. So they worked together on this promising system, but then it took too long, too much money, and the project collapsed. But then, like a phoenix, it began all over again with some of the same people, and that's when you come in the story, in fact. And so maybe you're going to tell me, but maybe at the time it was not going to be as much as a game console as was supposed to be before, but more and more like a CD system, internet box and stuff like that. Is that right?
So that's right. They planned they did put a CD on it. And at the time, of course, the storage on the CD was massive compared with the storage you might have on a hard drive or anything like that. So I think there was a lot of thought of putting a game on the CD with video, audio, and being the whole video game as well, and using parts of the CD to load up different sections. And so I spent a long time finding out how CDs worked, and this is why I said it was quite fun, because it was a lot of R&D. There was a lot of research and development, and it's very interesting.
It was exciting because it was the future of the gaming, the future of computers and stuff to have videos. And as I understood, you worked a lot on the decompression, to be able to have videos on the run while the CD was...
This is what I was trying to do, but the trouble was it just wasn't a fast enough machine. There was a core ASIC in there which was doing all the clever stuff, and it had a DSP built in, which was like a RISC processor. So, one instruction, one cycle, very fast. Quite hard to program, because you had to look ahead one instruction and remember what the next instruction was going to do. So in other words, if it had to do a jump, it would run one more instruction before the jump happened. This sort of thing. It's quite difficult. But I think the trouble with you just kept moving the goalposts. The expression is, isn't it? That they couldn't decide. It was never released as one thing. It was always going to move on and become something better and something better.
Yeah, because ASICs was something quite advanced, and what I've read, that they wanted also to market the hardware, in fact, for other manufacturers to do their own CD player or multimedia box or whatever.
Yes. I think that was the idea. It was a very good piece of design, but I think time was against it in the end, because technology, was this doubling of speed every year and a half. Moore's law meant that we were beginning to fall behind in comparison with other consoles and platforms that were out there. So it moved from being, I think there was the original Konix, and then there was something called Card 2, which was like a PC card containing, I don't quite know why it was done that way.
Okay.
And then it became like the video CD player we were working on, and that used an MPEG chip, and we used the ASIC to play the audio. I don't know quite why we did that. The idea was to have a variable, a multi-CD player, so play CD audio, play CD plus G, which I don't think many people know what that is even. Video CD is like what DVD would become a few years later, and photo CD.
Yeah, I remember photo CD,
which was another sort of dead product, really.
So because when I read about the project and the Konix stuff, it was in 1990, and so it was quite early for this hardware. But as you said, everything was moving so fast that 2 years later it was completely different, because Philips would introduce their CDI, CD Interactive, with all these features. In fact, we had to be able to play CDI discs, and that was a bit of a nightmare because the format is quite different to a video CD. So we would always be up against the problem of somebody would find a disc that didn't play on our system. Because there would be different rules. They would broken the rules, or they were doing it in a different way. But it was always the problem right to the end of moving goalposts. So you would have a product which you could have released, but the management would say, oh no, we need it to do this now, or we need it to do that now. So it was never completed. It was kind of completed, but they were never happy with it. It was always, we want to do this, we want to do that. There's a problem. The box was also able to go on the internet, no?
Yes, that was the project that happened after that, again with the same hardware. And that really was a case of producing it, and they were produced, they were manufactured, and we set up a production line in China and I think in Scotland. So we did sell some, but it was one of these things that the internet, as it was in, say, 1995, very simple, wasn't it?
Yeah.
You had a HTML, you had graphics on the web page, and that was it really. And then along came Flash and JavaScript, and all video playing. And this is where we had the problem that we eventually reached a point where We would, we just can't do this stuff. There's not enough storage or memory or processor power, but people expect it. You buy a box, you expect it to be able to do all the web pages that you want to go to.
Yeah.
And so that was kind of the end. And I think what happened when the company went bust eventually, or was wound up, that they sort of bought in some alternative product, completely different hardware, and badged it under their name.
Okay.
It is really the end of it. It was a kind of sad ending, really. But it was, for me personally, it was a very enjoyable period all that time. I worked with some great people, and every day was interesting. You'd come to work and not knowing what you were going to do that day, because there was always something new. And the hardware guy would put a circuit board on my desk, power supply in a in a cardboard box, and say, can you make this run? And I'd put a ROM emulator in and see if I can make it flash a light. It'd be a brand new piece of hardware, and that's really such fun.
So it was a new adventure every day, but it must have been very stressing, no?
No, I don't. There were some stressful times, I think, when we had a deadline or we couldn't get something to work. But I think overall it was great fun, and there was a lot of camaraderie, friendship, and I know many of the people from that time still. Because we all got on very well, especially the early days.
And
the first years.
It was a lot of new experience for you, working with video, yes. CD, trying to make everything work.
I realized how little I knew about the detail of television until I'd started there. Yeah. Because it was down to this level of sync pulses, timing on, the borders and the frame and, the front porch and back porch and all this sort of timing.
Overscan, stuff like that.
All this sort of stuff you get to know in detail, and also with audio, digital audio, how CDs work. I have Redbook downstairs, which I don't know if you know is the master book of how CDs work. I think I also have Yellow Book. They all have different colors. The Orange Book and so on.
White Book and
Yes, I think I've at least got 3 of those still. They're quite, they're very interesting. They're sort of very compactly written. They go into a lot of detail. But it was a very interesting time from a learning point of view. I learned a lot. I learned how to do 80386 from a very raw level of what happens at boot up and how to set up the selectors and addressing and so on. This sort of things I didn't know until then. That sort of level of detail you have to get into. It's very interesting. And
I believe the company was MSU, so it was Multi-System United Kingdom.
Multi-System, I think it was. There's a strange story to it, which was that. They acquired the name. They acquired the company name. I think they wanted something with MS in it.
Yeah.
And it was easier to buy a company name which was out there called MSU, which stood for something else before. So MSU stood for something else. So I think the MS for multi-system and the U happened to be there on the end of the name.
Because I read that there were also MSC for Multi-System China.
Maybe.
Which ended up producing the Multi-System, in the old Konix form, plastic case, which was predicted to be the game console. Only as a controller, in fact, with no real hardware inside. So in China, it just became reality, but with no hardware inside, just as a controller, just like Konix used to make joystick before.
That's right, and they have a chair, a driving wheel sort of thing.
But did you see that at the point where you began this?
I think that was after. I think that happened before.
Yeah, there were no trace of that.
I don't think there was, because we didn't have a centralized office.
Yeah,
it was probably at the chairman's house. I think. He would often take any prototypes and give them as gifts to his family. So we'd be working on something, and and then you come in on Monday and it would be gone because he'd given it to somebody hasn't.
Crazy.
We didn't. There was no at that time. As I say, we were all in different parts of the country, and so I think it probably got left behind. Any older hardware when we all moved to Milton Keynes, it probably went to the chairman's house or was thrown away.
Crazy.
Yeah, it was a bit odd.
Thank you for all these stories.
Okay.
Do you have something to add, especially, I don't know, about the Oric times? Or
I just think I do have some strong memories of that, and it was very influential for me. I did love the Oric, and I love programming it. It was a very important time in my life, and it led to better things and more things, and it's a sequence of events that leads me to here today.
Yeah.
I do have some regrets of not doing more on it at the time. Maybe if I'd have been a teenager, just at school, I would have just spent longer on the Oric and just for the fun of doing it. But because I was, in my 20s and need to make a living, it had to go to one side. I had to carry on with other projects. And that's the shame, really.
Well, at the same time, you have this feeling because you would have liked too much, but on the other side, you have the satisfaction that you have been inside the story, in the heart of the Oric story. In fact, that it was quite incredible.
It's nice. It's nice that people have any fond memories of anything I've done, and I'm pleased that some people enjoyed the games and the programs.
Yeah,
that's quite important.
And do you? Last question. You know that Oric was sold to a French company after that, and they managed to design a follow-up, which was already started in Oric. It was called the Stratos, and then it became the Telestrat in France. And it was oriented towards communication with the Minitel, like the Prestel in England.
Yeah.
So you could use it. It was bigger than Atmos. It was almost the same computer, but a little bigger. And you could, you would do the same thing as a normal Oric. Plus, you could create like websites for the Minitel.
Oh yeah.
You never heard about that?
I think only in recent years by following the Facebook groups. And so on. I don't think I had more than passing knowledge of it at the time. No.
Yeah.
It may have been in various computing magazines because I still was following the industry for many years of the computer games, and so it may have been in a magazine explaining. But then there were so many things going on. It was such a busy time in the 1980s, wasn't it? There was always something new.
It's incredible.
So I didn't really, the detail of it. I didn't follow for sure, but it's interesting though.
Yeah, well, I'm a bit passionate about this story, this time of computing history, because I love history and archaeology, and I'm very interested in this period. And when you look back at this 80s, it's crazy. Like in 1 or 2 years, everything is so different. It moves so fast. And like you said at the beginning of the interview, so many computers incompatible with each other. So there were hundreds of them.
Literally hundreds. So there's so many that maybe only lasted 6 months. And then just like, nobody's interested. In the end, I think it was probably down to just money, wasn't it? Advertising and, because the Spectrum always advertised in magazines and, full page, Commodore 64. And so it was those names in the end that people, it was first of all that shops stocked the computers and stocked the games, because if they don't, then you have no market, do you? You have no customers.
Yeah.
So it's all down to the shops and the distributors. It's one thing leading the other, isn't it? And so that's really what happened. We went from, initially computers weren't in shops at all, really, were they? There weren't computer games. There weren't. Everything was mail order, but you see it in a magazine, you send off for it, and then that's what makes it big, is when W.H. Smith's, big shops take the computers and the games, make room for them, and then you will start to selling in millions rather than thousands, and then it's the big boys, the big names, isn't it, that survive, the ones who can advertise.
Yeah,
And,
but
survive.
But at the same time, it was very interesting in England what happened, because it didn't happen in all the countries. I mean, in England, there was a lot of creativity around this 8-bit computers. I mean, I think about Dragon, Sinclair, Acorn, Oric, computers, and a lot of others, which are less known, but it was crazy.
I think what happened is there was a series of TV programs which promoted home computers. Now, that might have actually come after the big rush, but there certainly were a series of home computer series. These were largely based around the BBC Micro, I think. Yeah. But that's where a lot of the interest comes in. And also schools were taking these machines up, and so they were teaching the whole generation. And I don't know if that happened in all the countries as well, whether schools started to...
Yeah, I think, but in France, for example, there was a program, national program like this to put computers in schools. But the weight of the government in France is too much. It's no friends with big companies, so there were almost no room for small, like we would say, startup nowadays, but little companies to... There were some, because at the time when there was this program, this national program to put computers in schools, a bit like in England, a lot of computers appeared, but they had no share, so they died almost immediately. They presented their computer and the government say, no, we will take some Thomson computers, or because they were giants related to the governments, and complicated. But in England it was a bit different, and it looked like it was more free. And
I think compared with America too, I think we had much more variety.
And maybe something to look for in the link between universities and young companies, because most of them were talented people leaving the university and beginning to work on new computers. And it was possible, this was maybe more easily possible in England and in the United States than in France for some reasons. Well, thank you very much, Geoff.
Okay, you're welcome.
It's been a real pleasure.
Enjoy your video.
To discuss with you. So goodbye, Geoff.
Goodbye, thank you for having me.
Welcome.